All right, what's up? Welcome to the channel. My name is Headshot. Thank you so much for joining me today as we're looking at a 2012 Gen 1 Raptor. And with the new Raptor R dropping, I thought it only appropriate to look back at the Gen 1, what started all of this, and see if this truck is still a viable option all of these years later. If this is your first time stopping by, please make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit your notifications so you never miss a video from me. Let's look at everything this truck has to offer. And I think if you don't know much about the Gen 1 Raptor, you're gonna be surprised at all the technology they put in this truck, even in 2012. It's pretty incredible. Let's look at it. So let's start up here at the front. What powers this Gen 1 Raptor? And it is the 6.2 liter Boss engine from Ford. And this thing is putting out a 411 horsepower and like 430 foot-pounds of torque. And we just did the Silverado ZR2, which no knock against that, but that was a 6.2 as well, a way newer motor, and that one's only doing 420. So 411 horsepower, a bunch of torque. It's pretty amazing looking back now, all these years later, that they actually put a competitive motor in a 10-year-old truck. Now, of course, they started life with the 5.4, which they quickly faded out, and the 6.2 became the option for the first Gen Raptor. Now, of course, the Gen 2s, you have the 3.5 Eco, Gen 3s, same deal, Raptor R, totally different story there. But the motor and what powers this, of course, being a 6-speed transmission, still to this day holds up pretty dang well. One thing that Ford did to make this one stand out is, of course, instead of the blue oval, they went with the big FORD right there in the grill. And this is imitated by aftermarket companies and stuff, but nobody does it better than Ford. And this really sets this truck apart. And that's one thing that I like about it, is even from the Gen 1, they knew this truck is different. We got to make it look different. And they also have the amber lights, of course, in the grill and on either side of the front bumper there. Of course, those are standard. You have to have those on this truck because it's so wide. But just the front end of this truck, the headlights, they're F-150, nothing special there. But still, the way this looks with the wide fenders, the wide body on this thing really makes it scream, hey, I'm a different truck. I am not just your regular old F-150. And even all these years later, this is still a stylish looking truck with the wide fenders and the wide body, and it still has the cutouts there where you would put fog lights so you can see straight through to the Fox 2.5-inch shocks that are on this. Of course, they have the internal bypass and all that good stuff. It's an amazing looking truck, and I think over all of these years, it still stands the test of time as far as the look. Now, of course, you got your side steps. This is the Super Cruise. So they did this all the way up through the Gen 2s, where you would have like essentially a double cab setup, not the full 4 doors, but you still have room for 4 people, 5 people on the inside of the truck. So that was an option then. And of course, you're sitting on 35-inch tires, BFGs, the way it's always been. Coming back to the rear, you have those Fox internal bypass 2.5-inch shock. Back here, you have the big Raptor graphics. And what they used to do on these is actually put like the digital mud option. And that brings up a couple of interesting things I found out about the Gen 1 Raptor in doing my research. Did you know that the Gen 1 Raptor, actually the very first one sold, was a molten orange with the digital mud, sold for $130,000 when they first came out, the very first one, and anything over MSRP at the time actually went to a charity. So that's actually a pretty cool thing. But it's funny when you look at that $130,000 mark, considering Gen 3 prices, and of course Raptor R prices, whatever those are going to be. So we've almost come full circle. That seems like an exorbitant amount of money. But again, Raptors, one thing they will do, over time they will hold their value like pretty much no other truck out there. All right, so one cool thing that they've pretty much always done on these F-150s is the tailgate step. Not all of these have it, but this one does. So you have the release for your handle right there, and you're gonna kind of lift up. Just like that, lift up a little bit. This drops down. That opens up into a step right there. And essentially, you can easily pull yourself up. This is a great feature. And believe it or not, both Raptors I've had, both being Gen 2s, neither one of them have had this tailgate step, which is unfortunate, because if you want to add this, it's actually not a cheap option to do this. This is a great feature. boom, put your release, and it'll fold right back down just like that. So we won't spend too much time on this, but this one does have the tailgate extender as well. Coming to the back, you have this huge Raptor graphic. I didn't realize how big these things actually were then. And to be honest with you, I kind of prefer the way that looks. It's kind of like, you know, torn looking, whatever. I don't know, I personally like it. Of course, SVT is what they used back then. Now it's Ford Performance and all that. But then you have the blue oval Ford here, F-150 on this side, steel bumpers, of course, and you have your tow hooks that are integrated front and rear as well. So even being a 10-year-old truck, this thing is really no slouch. Now this one has, it almost is like the, not really the Recaro, but it's kind of like the Recaro color of the Gen 2s. You have this blue dash right here, blue on the center stack, blue on the console here with your shifter, blue inserts on the door. You have blue stitching on the seats, and they're kind of leather, but then they have this little bit of material right here, this kind of net looking material on either side where your butt would go. Heated and cooled seats. This truck also has off-road hill descent mode, off-road mode, 2 high, 4 high, 4 low. You have rear lockers on this truck, and you also have like towing mode with trailer backup assist. So if you have a Raptor, you know anything about them, a lot of these features sound very familiar. And of course, a lot of these have been integrated into Gen 2, Gen 3. So it's pretty impressive seeing all the tech that kind of went into this thing. And this is the first time I've ever been in a Gen 1 Raptor. And to be quite honest with you, if I didn't know any better, I could tell, you know, a few things are kind of old, like the auxiliary port, you know, things like that, but it's still pretty dang nice. And if you're somebody that likes a lot of technology in your vehicle, I don't know too many people that can look at this and say, oh man, this thing is way beyond its prime. You know, there are vehicles like that, and the one that comes to mind, don't get me wrong, I love Toyota, but Toyota, they master the vehicles they come out with, and then they start putting a lot of tech in them, where Ford has a lot of technology in this truck from the get-go. It's not like they just tried to release it with, you know, wide body kits and, you know, different lighting, different bumpers and things like that. They really threw everything into this truck, and I would imagine they kind of threw it out there not knowing how the environment would be. Would anybody want to buy a truck like this designed for off-road use and Baja 1000s and all this kind of stuff? It seemed like a kind of big risk at the time, and obviously since then we know that has paid off. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, looking at the interior of this truck and everything it comes with, I'm nothing short of impressed. You have your auxiliary switches like you do in the new ones, not as many of them, but it's already wired for that. That is a very good feature. Cup holders right there. Love the blue accents. Your center console, you have a nice wide open big center console here with some auxiliary port or cigarette lighter ports, or, you know, whatever. And you still have a cigarette lighter in this truck. Man, the good old days, they might be gone, but trucks like this can keep their memory alive for sure. Sitting on the inside of this thing, you have some pretty nice gauges here. If we're going through, you have your trans temp, trip A and B, fuel economy, which they said about 11 to what, 14 in this truck. Let's be honest, you don't even buy a new Raptor to get great gas mileage. This is what it is, 35-inch tires with a 6.2. You're just not gonna get it. So in your off-road screens here, you can see you have like the descent of the truck, right? The angle that it's sitting at, easy entry and exit, remote start. I love how it says courtesy wipe for the wipers. That's kind of funny. And this truck has 87,000 miles, by the way. You can see your gauges across the top. You have your tachometer, speedometer on the right-hand side, and then of course on the shifter, you have a tow haul mode on the shifter itself. You also have a manual shifter. You can go to second gear, manual mode, where then you can kind of shift through the gears with the button on the gear shifter itself. And of course, drive, reverse, neutral, all that good stuff. This one does have a backup camera. Now, the quality isn't the best, but considering what they were working with, I'd say it's actually not too bad. You can go into settings on the camera. You can up the contrast, brightness, and all that kind of stuff as well. Of course, power windows, power locks, power seats. You have cutouts in the door, big old cutouts, and then of course you'd have cup holders down there. These actually, instead of the B&O systems you see today, they actually came with a Sony system. All in all, the interior and the options that this gives you are quite impressive. You also have a front camera on this with the hill descent, off-road mode, 4 high, 4 low. You know, the changes they did to the new differentials with the basically all-wheel drive option, that's about all you're lacking here when it comes to the tech, and things just look a little bit different. Of course, the Gen 3s, that's kind of a different story, but just comparing Gen 1 and Gen 2, you know, there's a lot of technology here in a vehicle that's, you know, 10 years old. So I really appreciate how much technology actually goes into this truck. Heated and cooled seats. I mean, this thing really offers a lot to be the age that it is. Of course, we open up the door. You have a little handle right there, and then you get a view of the back seat as well. So it has that same type of mesh look with the blue inserts, the blue that goes around the Raptor. And they actually did the Raptor name and stitching up high. You know, you have these high bolstered seats with this blue stitching. So I guess back then when they went with a color theme, because I've seen these in like orange and maybe some other colors. Y'all that have the Gen 1 Raptors can tell me what the interior color of yours is or which ones you've seen, but it looks like when they go with a certain color, they do that color throughout the entire truck. And personally, the blue against the black leather still looks pretty amazing. And I personally like, it just separates itself, right? It doesn't, you know, from inside to out that it's not a standard F-150. Like I said, man, I love that they actually went the extra step and did all these things to differentiate this truck from normal F-150. So let me talk about the motor, because I did get actually a chance to drive it. And for what this is and how old it is, I'd say the motor's pretty awesome. Obviously, you're not gonna get the best fuel mileage. I know I've said that a couple times and people are gonna be like, oh my God, you don't buy a Raptor for fuel mileage. And I get it. I'm just saying, compared to like an EcoBoost, obviously, it's gonna be a little bit worse than that, but it's a V8, what do you expect? Okay, so let me wrap this thing up by saying, first of all, this is my first time ever spending any time with a Gen 1 Raptor. And there is so many things in this truck that we still have in the Gen 2s, Gen 3s, technology-wise, off-road mode, hill descent mode, you know, front and rear cameras. It's just, I'm impressed with the amount of technology that's in this truck. It's really incredible. I thought there was gonna be so many things that this truck was missing. I thought from an interior standpoint, before I came and did the video and actually looked at it, that it was gonna feel dated. And so if I'm getting back to the point of the video and are these things still a viable option in 2022? Well, it definitely ain't a lack of technology. I can tell you I drove a 16 Frontier and a 19 Tundra that felt more dated than this 2012 Raptor does. It just has a lot of technology. They made a big old screen there that still looks like it could fit into a truck today. Shifts really smooth, you know, the gear shifter, manual shift, all that kind of stuff. I'm really impressed, shocked and impressed of how much technology this thing really has. There's not a lot of cons to me. If I'm just comparing to Gen 2, it rides a little bit rougher. It feels more like a truck with a luxury interior, whereas the Gen 2s have a luxury interior and they feel super smooth. And like I said, I don't know if these shocks have been rebuilt. It's the 2.5 inch bypass shocks as opposed to the 3-inch that are on the newer ones. But regardless, I am super impressed. And I would say anybody that's looking at a Gen 1 Raptor, you know, there's things I believe that you should have, especially, you know, with any newer vehicle, especially with a Raptor, is an extended warranty. That's just something I'm a big believer in. But I think if you have that and you have one as well taken care of as this one, you could have a truck that would run a super long time. Again, as long as you don't mind the 8, 9, 10 miles per gallon you're gonna get in city. You know, my Gen 2, I get anywhere from like 14 to 17, depending on how I drive. Most of the time it's closer to like 14 in town using premium fuel. But the 6.2 is solid. It's got a, you know, I've heard mixed things about the transmission, but this is still a viable option. This is still a truck that could really still be made today with the technology it has with just a few updates. And by the way, I love the fact that it still has a cigarette lighter. It's almost like a time portal when you step in here and you see all this technology and then you see the cigarette lighter, and that's like a clear indicator that this truck is from a different time. But even though I said all that, this thing is absolutely incredible. I believe these had a 26-gallon tank. It's cool you can get the Super Cab or the Super Crew then. There's just so many features on this thing. I'm seriously impressed. So I'd love to hear what any of you Raptor, Gen 1 Raptor owners, how do you still feel about your truck? Do you feel a need to upgrade? Do you think this is still a viable truck? What do you like? What do you don't like? Whatever. Please leave those down below. Thank you guys for joining me. I'll see you in the next one. And as always, hold the rubber side down.